Yesterday was one of the biggest collapses that we've ever seen in altcoins, not just this cycle, but literally forever. And this is because upwards of $10 billion in leverage has been flushed from the system. So that's liquidations, taking people's full accounts right off the board. But with Bitcoin still standing strong, as if none of this even happened in the first place, it's pretty clear that the damage has been more or less a decimation of the altcoins. And what we saw was full-scale capitulation. So the question that we'll be looking to answer right now is the worst over? Or is this the beginning of the end of altcoins holding any relevance? And to be honest, I think the answer is pretty obvious. I believe we're at a spiritual bottom, as well as that was the worst of it. I'm not saying that this is the ultimate end or that you should rush in and spend all your money on altcoins, but I believe that from here on, you pretty much are going to see value in the altcoin space that you haven't gotten to see pretty much since late 2023, maybe at points in 2024, but this is what value looks like. It's when there's a full-scale collapse of valuations across the board and you get to reset prices to things that you haven't seen in years. To illustrate this trend, first let's look at Bitcoin dominance. And oh Lord, what a chart Bitcoin dominance is. You can see that there was a God candle, more like a God wick here, all the way up to 65% almost. You can see that it's come all the way back down here to almost play within these range highs. So if it closes below here, you could see this as maybe a deviation wick, or maybe this is the beginning of Bitcoin going on a whole new level of warpath. But it hasn't been this high since really the beginning of 2021, where it lost its dominance against altcoins, and it has been working its way up there ever since. If it works its way back up there further, it would be absolutely astronomical. And of course, if there's a Bitcoin-only strategic stockpile in the United States, I'm sure that would cause a ton of FOMO into Bitcoin, the asset. So it is quite possible that Bitcoin's strength remains here. Now, obviously, you guys know that I preach a balanced portfolio with Bitcoin at about 20%, ETH at about 10%, Solana at 20% just because of the strength of the cycle, Coinbase at 10%, MicroStrategy at 5%. You can figure those out as you want. But effectively, this is about 65% of your portfolio. And the reason why I have it like this is because days like yesterday will drive you absolutely insane if your entire portfolio is in meme coins. It'll just make you want to jump off a bridge. Kind of like it made me want to jump off a bridge looking at the size of some of my meme coin positions that I've kind of just let stand alone since the beginning of this run. And it made me realize that I do need to reevaluate the way my portfolio is constructed. So we'll talk about that at the end of the episode. But before I get to that, I want to break down what's going on here, because you essentially saw Bitcoin bust all the way down into the bottom end of this trading range. You see that this range has been established here since the, essentially the beginning of November. We've busted up, we broke 100K, and then we've just been ranging here, touching 110 roughly, or 108, and then just kind of ranging between 108 and 90. You can see that we busted all the way down to 88 for a split second back in January. But again, people thought that this was going to go all the way down and through, and maybe it goes through here. But if we do go down and start to test below 85,000 or below this low of 88,000 of January, I think we're looking at something different entirely. And I don't think that we're looking at the same continued strength of the bull run. But this balance of Bitcoin all the way back up into the range of 11% is insane, and it just shows that Bitcoin is on a warpath right now. And I do believe that we're going to see some crazy announcements coming up, maybe even as soon as today. But what I want to point out here is others. And this is the others over Bitcoin chart. This is others charted against Bitcoin. Others is everything outside of the top 10, aka, the altcoins that we know and love. And they are down 50%. 50% in just the last, 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks or so. Since the beginning of December, we're now in the beginning of February, about 8 weeks ago, this has been one of the most brutal collapses that I've ever seen. And what's so unbelievably difficult about this one, in my opinion, is all the good news around Trump getting elected, essentially the legalization of altcoins, essentially the legalization of being an American altcoin builder, trader. It feels like we're entering into this brave new age specifically for non-Bitcoin things, which Bitcoin wasn't really in jeopardy. It already had the ETF. It was under pretty clear regulatory rules even before Trump was elected. But it was really the altcoins that we were so excited to see get the green flag under Trump. And ever since, about a month before the inauguration, a month and a half, this has been one of the most brutal downtrends ever. I mean, if you just look at this chart, it's pretty clear that what we saw yesterday marked at least some form of capitulation. You can see this wick is just absolutely disgusting. And you can also tell from this reaction off the lows that that was a major level of support, that we actually saw bids come in here for altcoins against Bitcoin for the first time in quite a while. And I think this chart tells a really good story where if you have essentially the others dominance, this is others, meaning everything outside the top 10 as a percentage of the total market. And you can see that it hasn't been here since the explosion that took Bitcoin to new highs at the beginning of 2021. This move that took it into this area and below it and then back up, this was the start of the last bull run. You saw this massive capitulation down at the end of 2020 all the way into January, and you can see that it bottomed in here around the 7th of January, right before the inauguration, and then we went onwards and upwards. And then once this happened, effectively, that was the beginning. That was the insane bull run. But you had this complete capitulation down here, about 54% from those levels. So if you see here, we've come down from here about, what is this, 37%. So not nearly as bad. Again, this formation did mark the beginning of when you wanted to switch from being allocated from Bitcoin to altcoins. I'm not saying we're at the bottom yet. I'm just saying that this was also the lows that we saw back in 2023. So regardless of how bad this feels, we also saw that it bounced all the way back into the range and is now green on the day. You can see here that this candle is green on the day. And so maybe, just maybe, that was capitulation. Now, could things get worse? Of course, anything could happen. I do think that there is potential now for Bitcoin to go on this mega run if the United States starts leaning in, buying it. If tariffs, which are the hot topic of the day, start to really affect other nations and their strength of their currency and the strength of their economy, there could be some serious logic around those countries starting to allocate to Bitcoin as a hedge, because the United States is effectively bullying other countries right now with trade, something we haven't seen happen in what feels like forever. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But in my estimation, this looks like a pretty brutal candle. And I do think, at least for the near term, at least for the next few days, we should see that be the end of the damage. Again, I'm not saying you need to rush in here, but I'm saying we're starting to enter deep value zones for altcoins, which historically will then get rotated back into once the market flips more risk on. We also saw a pretty significant trend here. You see USDT, you see essentially stable coins, which is USDC and USDT. They busted above this this sort of significant level here, which was a bottoming level over here. And now they've kind of rejected that new range, but they did spike all the way up, a massive candle up to almost 7%. And you saw the RSI got extremely overheated. You can see down here, this yellow line, it hit 80, some high 80s%. And you can see over the history of its existence, having something over that 80% threshold, it almost never stays there over that 85% threshold, and it tends to mark an extreme. Again, none of these pieces of data guarantee that price goes the other way for altcoins, but it's showing that the trend of altcoins getting the life sucked out of them in favor of Bitcoin and nothing else is potentially coming slowly to an end, if not reaching its apex soon. Again, we are in a crazy moment where if we start to see a strategic Bitcoin reserve and we start to see hyper Bitcoinization and we start to see Bitcoin, that might drive some crazy amount of buying of Bitcoin and nothing else. And remember, we've gone through our portfolio design many times, but effectively, if you keep your base portfolio mostly in Bitcoin, ETH, Solana, Coinbase MicroStrategy, I mean, Coinbase MicroStrategy and Bitcoin tend to move together, and Solana has been the strongest performer of major altcoins. It's actually done way more than Bitcoin as far as growth from the bottom. Solana was $8 at the bottom, and it's hit as high as $260. Quick math there, it's about a 35x to 30-something x. So what you see here is that this has been a great portfolio design. Obviously, ETH has been the ugly duckling of the bunch, but if you have your portfolio set up like this, you're already set up to capture a significant chunk of Bitcoin upside. If you want to be extreme, you can just do 80% Bitcoin. I mean, some people do 80 or 100% Bitcoin. I personally have had a lot of luck with altcoins. I will continue to stick with my strategy of AI, gaming, and memes. Obviously, AI and memes have been standouts, and we'll talk about how I'm managing those positions here in a second. But again, you had this massive candle on Bitcoin. It popped all the way back into the upper side of the range, which is very good. You then also have what looks like a capitulation candle a bit on others BTC. You have what definitely looks like a capitulation candle on others dominance. And then you also have stable coins, which look like, that was a pretty extensive move. Maybe it continues to push onward and upward. But again, this high level of RSI doesn't tend to continue in the history of these stablecoins for very long. So there's quite a bit of data to show that that trend might be overextended, at least for now. Obviously, we're really waiting for the altcoin run to start. And so let's talk a little bit about how that might happen. What you're seeing here is this parody account of Justin Trudeau saying, hey, look, Mexico has agreed to work with President Trump and managed to avoid tariffs. I, on the other hand, refuse to work with our ally and neighbor and starting a massive trade war instead. What the result of these tariffs and these negotiations has been is almost instantly the other countries are jumping and doing whatever Trump wants. It's absolutely kind of crazy to see the power of the United States wielded in this way that we haven't seen it wielded in so long, which is essentially to say the US writes the rules and everyone needs to follow them. Even if those rules change rapidly overnight, that's the game. And so the art of the deal is happening in real time with these tariffs, where you're seeing President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico was effectively just brought into line overnight and is now using her military to police the drug trade, to police the cartels, and to control illegal immigration, as well as potentially there's going to be some talk about trade. I'm sure there's going to be a massive trade discussion happening here. We also see here that this morning, Cynthia Lummis is quote tweeting the president signing an EO calling for the creation of a sovereign wealth fund. If you know what a sovereign wealth fund is, it's essentially the United States acting as an investor. And that means that there's this new pool of funding that it can be controlled from the executive office, most likely. And this might be his workaround to getting a national or a strategic Bitcoin reserve. You see Cynthia Lummis saying this is a big deal with the Bitcoin B. So maybe, just maybe, this is the beginning of the United States actually stockpiling Bitcoin. And if that announcement goes out, we're going to see Bitcoin rapidly reprice upwards and leave everything else in the dust for a short amount of time, which is why having some material Bitcoin exposure for the next little bit is very wise. And so now headlines like this, where Donald Trump is considering hitting the EU with 10% tariffs on all imported goods, we're actually realizing that this isn't just some like permanent, long-term, crazy, maniacal stance by Donald Trump, but it's a bargaining tool. It's a power structure tool to show who's boss and to get everyone in line with a new form of trade. And so what is that new form of trade? Because obviously this has a lot of people freaking out that this could cause a ton of damage. But I actually saw this post by Jeff Park, who's the head of alpha strategies at Bitwise Invest. He has actually presented an insane thesis here that we're going to go through, where he talks about how Trump is using these tariffs to create what he calls the Plaza Accord 2.0. Now, the Plaza Accord 1.0 happened in the 80s, where the United States got all of its trading partners to effectively weaken the dollar. And by weakening the dollar, they were able to stimulate the heck out of real estate, markets, the stocks. They were essentially able to pull a ton of productivity into their economy by weakening the dollar. You don't need to know what any of this means, but just know right now, the dollar's way too strong and rates are way too high. So the only way to lower the strength of the dollar and to lower the actual value of rates and to lower the borrowing cost of rates is through what they're calling Plaza Accord 2.0. First of all, he's putting out the thesis that there won't be that much inflation from tariffs because you will get a tax cut. And if you get a tax cut in combination with a tariff increase, the actual cost to you, the consumer, won't be inflationary. So you have sort of pull on one end, push on the other. And what we know is that Trump is doing exactly what he said he would do, which is lower your taxes and increase tariffs. That's his goal. So we assume he's going to do that. The second thing that's interesting here is that the goal of this new Plaza Accord, as you know, according to Jeff here, and I actually did an interview with him, so I actually get to see that. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. But essentially, he's saying that the goal of this is to devalue the dollar, have the dollar fall in value, and that way will drive massive amounts of liquidity into markets, into risk, into things like Bitcoin, into things like real estate, and re-enliven the economy, and also critically allow for what Trump wants, which is to bring manufacturing back to the United States. That's what this is all about. Without this barter, this art of the deal thing that Trump's doing, he can't bring the manufacturing back into the United States because there's too many obstacles. The dollar's too strong. There's too many trade deals that won't allow this. So he's trying to re-scramble the board to allow for America to produce things, as well as to create this golden age here of productivity in markets. So beyond the knee-jerk reaction of the markets, which has almost completely abated now, has gone away almost entirely, we're seeing that there might be a bigger game here. And according to Jeff here, this drives everyone into Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the asset to own. Make sure to follow me on Twitter. You can see his full thesis. But again, as Horst said, not a March 2020 drop, but it is a March 2020 recovery for Bitcoin. There is no better market. We're also about to see David Sachs put out a press conference here, and he's going to talk about how America will be the leader in digital assets, in crypto. So how could you not like this timeline? The only thing that's not to like about this timeline is this others chart. And hopefully what we've seen here from the others chart is that that was the worst of it. That's what I'm hoping. Because without this crumbling of the altcoin strength in the markets, this is the best possible timeline. Chad builders from the United States can get incredibly good treatment. Apparently you can now walk right into the front doors of the SEC and ask them open-ended questions and figure out how to build whatever you're building completely within the bounds of regulations. This is amazing. No subpoenas. They changed it so that you need to have this vote by commissioners. And we know that the commissioners don't like to sue crypto companies, the ones that are in charge. So lawsuits aren't just going to go out like that. You're going to need a real case of something going wrong here in order to sue a crypto company. And this is a whole sea change. This is the regulatory sea change that we've been looking for. So with all that being said, let's talk about the altcoins. And I'm going to share with you some updates to my strategy. First of all, dying on this hill, I agree with Doug Funny. I mean, I'm certainly dead on this hill if this doesn't work out. We're getting a classic definition alt season, i.e. Bitcoin dominance drops a lot, unambiguous downward trend on the chart, and many alts will do well. relative strength alts, the things that have gone astronomical over the first part of the year that went 20, 30, 40x in the beginning of the year. The alts that are hot and interesting, they will attract liquidity and continue to have parabolas instead of having this 1 second pump and then just incredible dump to zero like we've seen over the last 12 months. The widely listed central exchange alts, the ones that are on Binance, Coinbase, those will catch natural pumps from the market. The infinite meme coin, shitcoin stuff is not going to catch infinite bids. There's no way. So this I agree with completely. The way I define alt season is you get the hot narratives like we've seen, AI, memes, super hot narratives. We're about to start seeing RWA as a hot narrative, and I'll show you why in the charts in just a second. And I believe at the end of the run, or at least at some point in the run, we're going to see a gaming season. We'll talk about that. As you guys know, I'm all in. I'm just staying with the gaming stuff. So now with this being my thesis, you know that I do believe that we'll see an alt season. I have enough Bitcoin exposure through 55% of my portfolio that's exposed to Bitcoin, MicroStrategy, Coinbase, and even Solana, which has been pumping like crazy with Bitcoin. Let's go ahead and look at the ugly stepchild in the room. That is the Trump trade. I believe that this will start to be the expression of when altcoin season comes back. I think Trump will do really, really well. But right now I've had to reduce my position in Trump. I was up a lot and I started to get really, really overly emotionally tied up into these positions. And when the market does what it did over the last 24, 48 hours, it really reveals the trades that get you uncomfortable, because I know that builder coins will come back. There's always new tech, new products being shipped, new catalysts, new reasons to believe. But sometimes with meme coins, no matter how great they are, it can be really difficult to hold them. And that's why I found that I need to rebalance my portfolio, even if I underperform for this, and I need to stay laser dialed focused on my game to outperform this cycle. And speaking of game, we now have one of the most obvious trades in the history of cryptocurrency staring us down right in the eyes. And you only have to look as far as Mr. Larry Fink to see that this is happening. Larry Fink has been out there saying he wants to tokenize everything. He wants to tokenize bonds. He wants to tokenize stocks. He probably wants to tokenize water. I don't know what he wants to tokenize, but this guy is going to do it. And we know that Larry Fink, what he wants, he gets, especially now with a friendly, business-friendly SEC that's willing to let crypto go and experiment. This is a guarantee that tokenization is coming to stocks, to bonds, to hedge funds, to any kind of major TradFi institution. They are going to be all over this. This is the equivalent of bringing the entire real world economy, traditional economy on chain. And I wasn't a big fan of this because to me, real world assets cannot exist on the blockchain without so many layers of trust and issues. But now this is pretty much a BlackRock trade. If you believe that BlackRock is going to be successful at getting what they want, then this is the trade. And when you look at the charts of things like MantraDAO or Ondo, it's pretty clear that they're existing in an entirely different market structure than the rest of crypto. So I'm going to be doing a deep dive into RWA because the thing about TradFi is they are actually forced to tell you what they want to have happen months and months ahead of time. We saw that with the ETFs. We saw that with pretty much every change that's happening in the traditional finance world. Larry Fink is doing a full media tour telling us exactly what he's going to be doing months and months ahead of time. And real world assets is this generic buzz term for tokenizing anything that's non-crypto and bringing it so it's tradable on chain. That could mean derivatives. That could mean hedge fund assets. That could mean literally trillions of dollars worth of real estate. We have no idea what it really does mean, but we know that there's an open-ended narrative here that could mean a ton of money coming on chain. And this is one of those where it's actually really hard to fake a high quality real world asset type of protocol. You need to actually have ties and relationships with these very serious institutions. There's a lot of due diligence. There's a lot of compliance. So sifting through and finding some high quality RWA plays, I don't think it's going to be as high a skill game. And I think that the upside could be there. I think the narrative is obvious. And so this to me is an obvious next play. I think that it's going to be pretty clear that these are going to have quite a moment. Meanwhile, I don't know if you remember, but things like Neural, some of the darlings of this channel, ever since they had this breakout, and I kept saying this when I was covering Neural, ever since it broke out from this like $6 range, it never really retested it. It just went all the way onwards and upwards, another almost 3x, and it came all the way down and finally retested it. And as you can see on this capitulation wick yesterday, it went as low as sort of the low of this range, right? It tested the lower part of this range at about 370, and then it bounced immediately back above this blue line. So you could see that's what felt like a capitulation wick. And again, you saw that it bounced a pretty significant chunk here. It bounced all the way up about almost 100% bounce. So you could see when things bounce 100% off the lows, that is a sign that the market still has a bit of excitement there, that there's definitely some desire to still own and trade these assets. So to me, I think that this is not the end of the AI trade. I think that we've finally seen prices reduced on things in AI to levels that are not completely, utterly insane. So getting into your favorite AI coins, getting into the RWA coins, probably those are the first trades I do. But as always, you know, I'm very excited for gaming season. I think there will be one fun at the end of the cycle. But what I've done is I've kind of swept my gaming tokens into super. I just betting on myself, not financial advice at all. I'm just saying the strongest expression of the gaming trade has been super so far. I believe that it will continue to be super. The only thing holding back the gaming trade is the gaming season hasn't really kicked off. I believe the more risk on altcoin season will be kind to gaming. But I also believe that AI and RWA are probably going to come first. Now, finally, we need to talk about memes. And the thing for me is that meme coins changed when Trump did what he did. I think that Trump, maybe he didn't top the entire meme coin sector, but he definitely created a new dynamic in meme coins where there's effectively very little desire to hold these because people are just chasing the new hot meme of the day and constantly just rotating. And as a result, I think that there's been a bit of a come to Jesus moment in memes and that a lot of these are going to get wiped off the board. So I've just reduced my overall exposure to memes. Do I think that memes will be a part of the cycle? Of course. I mean, the cat is out of the bag. Pandora's box has been opened. And there's a generation of people who will do nothing but be on pump fund 24/7. And there's a generation of people who think that these top memes are going to replace, sovereign currencies. I don't know if any of that's going to happen. I can tell you that I personally would much rather bet on fundamentals, whether that's an AI, RWA, gaming, Bitcoin, L1s. Those are the things that I find I actually want to hold long-term and I see the value in the upside. Memes, I still hold a bit of Pepe, still hold a bit of Mog, still hold some Pudgy Penguins. I think that those are all going to do well. Fartcoin, official Trump, Doge, I see a space for them in your portfolio. But I personally just think that we need to observe the market over the next few weeks and months to try to understand until really Trump pumps back up to maybe all-time highs or maybe a significant increased value. I'm not sure that the meme coin sector is going to have that much upside. Obviously, I think the ETH-based memes will do well, probably easier bet because once ETH does take off, I think ETH memes will take off. But I think as far as the Solana memes, which is where a lot of these are, I think Trump now needs to kind of make a move. Otherwise, you get what could be a sort of lack of belief, a lack of desire to hold a lot of these. So anyway, the way I see memes is I'm kind of not wanting to hold a tremendous amount of them. I found myself most stressed out about my meme coin positions versus my other coin positions on this recent dump. And so I've decided I don't want to hold them as much because I don't want to be suffering as much in these swings. You need to have ice in your veins during these collapses to make good decisions, not get emotional. And so that's what I'm doing for me. Hopefully I'm the YouTuber bottom signal. Again, nothing would make me happier than seeing everything I've just mentioned, especially Mog and some of these other communities pump to infinity. Even Trump, I want to see go up and away because that would really be beneficial to the whole space. There's so many people who are holding these coins, who are holding these communities. I want to see them all make money. But that being said, I'm just sharing with you my moves. I want to be in builder coins. I want to be in utility coins because I believe those seasons will hit like an absolute truck. And if we're seeing anything with Bitcoin and its season that it's having, its ability to solve the debt crisis, its ability to actually take on this problem of fiat currency debasement, well, that is a real value prop that is currently worth trillions of dollars. And I believe it's on path to tens, if not hundreds of trillions of dollars. So naturally, what will follow from that are high quality utility altcoins that solve real problems. And I'm excited for those to take the limelight because I believe that the biggest money bags will rotate into the highest quality coins when the time is right. That's my thesis. And I'm willing to wait for it. As always, I hope you guys enjoy this video. I hope that this was informative. I do believe that most of the damage is probably over from this capitulation. And I believe that we are now seeing value in the altcoin space, despite the fact, maybe because of the fact that we're seeing so much negativity. If you guys like this one, make sure to check out this video popping up right now.